many of you in this room are mortal, ultimately doomed to die? Now keep your hand up if you're also someone who's concerned about the environmental future of our planet. You might be wondering what these questions have to do with one another, and the answer lies in my next question. Have you considered the impact your death might have on our environment? The answer is most likely no. It makes us feel very human and impermanent to talk about death. We avoid it like the plague. But if you're someone who's death aware, an environmentalist, or just someone who likes to be prepared, I'd like to let you in on your rights as a consumer when it comes to funeral practices, some alternative sustainable options to the traditional funeral system, and how you can be your own advocate for your good death. One thing you need to remember about the funeral industry is that it's just that, an industry. Sometimes money has to come first. So when you step into a corporate funeral home, oftentimes they might have to try to upsell you on things you may not want or need. That's not to say that every person in the funeral industry is some horrible vampire creature who wants to suck away all your money and bury great-grandma in a shoebox. No. Most people in the funeral industry are loving, caring people who want to help you deal with your grief. But by nature, they sometimes have to sell you things that do things that they may not agree with. And you have to be prepared for that. But these are some options that you can pursue if you want to follow the traditional funeral system, but want it to be a little more environmentally conscientious. Many people don't know that they can say no to embalming. For those of you that may not know, embalming is the process of draining the body of its fluids and replacing it with a chemical embalming agent which allows for long-term preservation. This is often the default at many funeral homes, and it's more expensive, often prohibitively expensive for many families. And as it's the default for many funeral homes, you may have to ask for them to specifically not do it. It is not any less safe to view a body if it's unembalmed. That's a myth that's been perpetuated for a long time. It is perfectly safe to see a body if they are unembalmed. Great-grandma will still be looking pretty good without being embalmed. I mean, she will look very dead, but she'll look pretty good for dead. And if the funeral home hums and haws and isn't meeting your needs and your desires, then you can take your business elsewhere. Many people don't know that they have the option to leave and walk away if the funeral home is not meeting their needs. Like anything you would in life, shop around and look at your options before you make a firm commitment. There are also alternative containers that you can pursue. Many funeral homes will make you feel like burying great-grandma in a solid platinum casket is more dignified and respectful than a pine box, but they're both gonna go in the dirt. I want you to remember that no matter how much anyone tries to upsell you, you don't need to prove anything to them. You know how much you love the departed, and they know how much you love them. You don't need to prove anything to anyone by sending thousands on funeral services, by buying these ornate coffins and urns. There are many alternatives. There's pine boxes, there's hemp caskets, there's wicker caskets. You can even bring in your own casket or urn if you've arranged for that ahead of time. There are also alternative funerals, where you don't have to have a funeral at the funeral home. A lot of people believe that they can't take the body elsewhere to do it, but some funeral homes will impose that restriction. It is their business in the end, and we have to respect their rights, and they have to respect our rights, respectively. But you can have a wake or memorial or a celebration of life anywhere you'd like, at home, at the park, on a boat, Chuck E. Cheese, wherever you think would make your loved ones feel most comfortable in their grief. But if you're someone who's looking for a more incredibly eco-friendly option, there are those out there. These are just some ways that you can modify the very traditional funeral system if that's what you want. We should all do what makes us most comfortable in our death. And if that's traditional, then that's traditional. That's what we should do. But these are just some alternatives that you might consider. There are some sustainable alternatives, my favorite of which is the green burial. This is what I want for myself. It's a very simple and minimalist sort of thing. It consists of a hole and a body and a shroud and some flowers. This way everything that goes into the earth is biodegradable. As such, You have no choice but to not be embalmed with this procedure. That's part of what makes it so green. And to me, this is a lovely way to give back to the earth at the end of your life. It nourishes all that's around you. I just personally love it. But that's just me. There's also a family involvement nature that often takes place in green burials that sometimes you can't get at traditional funeral homes. Families can often come and dress the bodies, shroud the bodies, clean the bodies, and a lot of people find this a wonderful way to say goodbye, as intimidating and daunting as it sometimes seems. Really, it's lovely, or so I would think. You can also get creative. If you can dream it and you start planning ahead of time, then odds are you can find someone who will accommodate your ideas. Some people like to be buried with wildflowers on top of them, so that way their body can become sort of a miniature garden. After Luke Perry's unfortunate passing, he was buried in a biodegradable mushroom suit, and it nourishes the life around him. That was what made him happy. And if you can think of what would make you happy in your death, then you can surely find someone who will be willing to help you with that. In many parts of the world, there are some forms of burial that haven't quite hit the West yet. One of these is recyclable graves. This is a more common practice in Europe, Asia, and Africa, but I suppose India. Anyway, in this scenario, a body is interred and allowed to decompose for around 10 years, or however long it takes, and after which the remains, which have now become bones, are removed and they are given back to the family, where they are often cremated or they can be placed in a family mausoleum or anything of that sort. But the real gist of it is that the land has become usable again. And as there's a taboo in the Western world about ever disturbing a gravesite, we render this land forever inert. If we implemented this on a worldwide scale, we could solve our problem about running out of room to bury our dead, especially in densely populated urban environments. In Tibet, there is Tibetan Sky Burial, which the bodies of Tibetan monks are placed on isolated mountaintops and allowed to be eaten by predators, often vultures. And although this may sound intense to us here, for these monks, it's a very real way to give back to the earth what little they took away from it at the end of their life. We could implement this here by having designated woodland areas to have bodies left and buried through predation. This is an option for some people. For some people, that's horrifying. They don't like it at all. But for many people, this is a great way to be part of the earth. Thinking about your own mortality, no matter how frightening, is a great way to come to terms with it. For me, it was a matter of deciding what I wanted to be done with my corpse. I'm getting a little ambitious. It's a little early, but you know, it pays to be prepared. What I want for myself is the green burial route. I want to be shrouded and covered in flowers, and I want to be buried, and everyone I love puts a little dirt on me. And if Elton John could come and sing, that would be great. This is a daunting process for many people and something that's very hard to start thinking about, but it removes some of the mystery that surrounds death, and oftentimes that's the most frightening part, all the unknowns. Talking about what you want and what your loved ones want is wonderful. And thinking about what you don't want is just as important. When I think about being in a casket or in a mausoleum, I feel very cramped and suffocated. I don't like the idea of being on someone's urn or, God forbid, in someone's closet, so cremation is out. But when I think of being this horrible food for worms, disgusting mess in the ground of the artist formerly known as MacKenzie, I love it. I'm comforted, and I have no idea why. But that's sort of the gist of it. You don't need to know why. That's just how you feel. And we all come to this conclusion eventually, but oftentimes it's better to do it sooner rather than later. And once you make a decision like this, it's important to tell someone who's going to outlive you. Because one of the most terrifying things can be planning a funeral for someone you love and having no idea what they would have wanted. I hope when you go home tonight that you'll talk to your loved ones about what you want for your death and what they want for their death, as frightening and jarring as that might be. I think this is a conversation that needs to be sparked. And even if you get shooed away with I don't care, I'll be dead. Or something like, let's not talk about that right now, sweetie. Let's wait. Things like that. Sparking that conversation and letting your loved ones know that you're ready to have that talk is important. I live my life as someone who is incredibly concerned about the future of our environment, and I want my death to serve that aim. I hope you'll think about how you can put a positive spin on your own mortality. Thank you.